You can do that with the little hand up there in the upper right-hand corner. We are going to be recording this. There's a few people who couldn't attend the webinar earlier this week, or in special case of people who are coming from far away, like Asia or something. We're going to record the program so they can listen into it before we get started. You can also type in questions at the bottom of the screen there in the lower right-hand corner. If you want to do the chat, you can do that, and Beth and I will kind of watch for that and see if we can answer questions as we're going along. The program itself is going to be run by Sue, myself, and Beth, and then we'll also be joined by Becky Spears during the week. She'll come toward the end of the week and talk a little bit about her experience in applying these materials. But you get a little sense here of Sue's background in organization design, a little bit of my background in organization development and design, and then Beth's background at General Mills in terms of building some organization design capability in the General Mills organization. And the three of us will be doing most of the delivery during the week in Southern California in a couple of weeks. But those are kind of the folks who you'll be interacting with and talking with during the week. We wanted to spend some time this morning, if you're on the West Coast. Those of us in Europe, it's the afternoon. And we wanted to give you kind of an overview of the key model that we're going to be using during the week. It's Jay Galbraith's STAR model. It's probably one of the most used organization design models out there today. There's a couple others, McKinsey 7S, for example, and there's a couple others out there. They're all kind of the same, but we worked a lot with Jay when he was at the center, and we think this is probably the most elegant model. It's got the smallest number of things in it with the most powerful impact. So we wanted to kind of give you a little bit of a background in that model. Toward the end of when I get done talking, Beth's going to speak to you a little bit about the best way to sort of get ready for the seminar and get the most out of it. And then we want to be sure we leave, 10 minutes or so at the end of the hour so that you can ask questions about the workshop, logistics, content, things like that. And so that's the overview of our webinar today. We're going to start with just a basic definition, and we'll review this as well during the session, but just to get you in the frame of mind about what we're talking about when we say the term organization design. And what we mean is it's kind of two parts to it. I like to call it the noun and the verb. The noun is it's organization design. It's a set of elements inside your organization, structures and goal-setting processes and comp and benefits policies. And these are the pieces that we're going to try and fit together in a certain way so that they result in some business outcomes, including financial performance, satisfied customers, engaged employees, and then increasingly organizations are being asked to be sustainable and socially responsible as well. So we want to be designing organizations to try and hit the objectives and the results and the outcomes that the organization is looking for. And that's kind of the noun, right, and how the organization is configured to deliver on those results. But design is also a verb, and it's sort of the way we go about putting an organization together. In that sense, we're very much into, and organization design is very much related to sort of the change management side of things and how you implement new designs. And the focus of the course is going to be more on the content of design and how do you put these things together, but you can't get away from the fact that they're connected to an implementation process and a change process. And so we'll be trying to balance those two issues during the course of the week. But the key framework, the one that we're just going to keep referring to over and over again during the week, is the STAR model. And it was developed by Jay Galbraith in the mid-90s or so. You will see some slightly different versions of the model. For example, a lot of times when you're reading about the STAR model, you'll see the strategy box sort of put in the same place where we've got capabilities and work processes. And then in the lower right where it says management processes, that'll be a bubble that just sort of says processes. And that's one of the models. Jay had, 2 or 3 versions of it. We like to use this one because it calls out specifically the notion that strategy is this sort of overarching set of ideas that are really going to drive the way the organization is put together and how it's aligned to accomplish that strategy. We also like this model because it calls out and distinguishes between 2 kinds of processes. There is a work process, and that's the work that the organization does that delivers value to a customer, and a different kind of work, which is the work that managers do. So you have a set of management processes. And we try and distinguish those 2 things, and that's why we like this model a little better than the one that puts strategy inside of the 5 boxes. And this is the one we're going to be using during the week and trying to go through and demonstrate. And what I want to do now is just kind of walk you around the STAR and introduce each of these pieces so that you get in your mind a little bit of the background, just some basic ideas of what these different pieces are, a little bit about how they fit together, so that you can just start to think about these as you fill out your pre-work, as you get into some of the readings and some of the cases. You can have these different pieces in the back of your mind and have some ideas about them. Okay. I think one of the things that Sue and Beth and I are really clear about is the importance of starting off with strategy. We think that any organization that is going to go through a design process really needs to be clear about what their strategy is. And this applies to the corporation or the entire enterprise. It applies to business units or regions that you might have in your organization. And it also applies to functions. We don't see any problem at all in thinking about functions and trying to describe the strategy that a function has in its role as a function to support the overall business strategy or the enterprise strategy. Strategy has a couple of parts. We talk about goals and strategy. So the goals are sort of the outcomes that you're trying to achieve, and the strategy is how you're going to achieve them. So we'll talk a little bit about strategy as direction. Does the organization understand and know the direction that it's headed? We know, for example, that we're headed towards emerging markets, and we're moving away from being strictly a domestic organization. Are we moving towards digitalization and the implications of that in the organization? So does the organization have a clear sense about the direction that it's headed and the priorities, the things that it's decided to do and not do, the customers it wants to attract and those customers which might be less important, so you're choosing segments and channels and customer sets that might be more or less important to you. We'll talk about aggressiveness. How aggressive is the organization in achieving its objectives? Are you taking on a lot of risk? Are you betting the company on some particular products or processes that you think are going to be important? And we'll also talk about the extent to which the strategy is not only clear, but is it shared? And a shared strategy has some real advantages because it sort of takes the pressure off the organization to have a policy for everything because people understand what they're supposed to do. So we'll talk about strategy on Tuesday afternoon of the week and try and get really clear about and provide you with some tools for getting really clear about the strategy in your enterprise, the business unit, or the functions. Once your strategy is clear, you can move to the work processes and capabilities. And I think it's important to note what is the kind of the first thing at the top of the star there. We see the work that organizations are doing as really the manifestation of the strategy. Strategy is an idea, it's a direction. We want to do certain things in a certain way. And the way you do your work, the way you set up your factories, your supply chains, your R&D processes, the way you set those up is really the manifestation of the strategy. So we want to know, what is it that the organization is able to do? Are you able to open up new offices and new franchisees really quickly? Are you able to enter markets really well? Do you train your managers, in a great way? Like General Electric, was known as a real strong leadership development organization for a long time. That was a capability that they had developed. Starbucks has a way of sort of getting coffee served and different kinds of drinks and foods served in a certain way. So does McDonald's. And so we want to talk and understand what are the characteristics of those work processes, what are the characteristics of those capabilities that the organization has to be really good at if its strategy is going to be successful. So again, we see this, it's the manifestation of the strategy. It's a way to talk about what's the work that people are doing inside of marketing, inside of manufacturing and distribution, inside of the finance organization. So what's the work? And we want to be sure, as I move around the star, to distinguish that kind of work that's adding value for customers. I want to distinguish that from managerial work and how you coordinate and set goals and allocate resources so that the work can actually be done. Okay? So that's the notion about the work processes. And get really clear about how you're adding value, how you're using labor, capital, technology to deliver value for customers. Then we get over to the thing that everybody sort of associates with org design. A lot of people sort of see, and when they hear the word org design, what they really are thinking about is what's the structure of the organization. And I think one of the things that we try to do during the week is get really clear with you that design is more than just structure. And in fact, we try and focus on two kinds of structures. There's the sort of the core structure, which represents the way we split the organization into different kinds of groups for different kinds of reasons. So it could be a customer-oriented structure that organizes and focuses attention and resources on different customer sets. It could be on different products. It could be on different regions or geographies. And so the way the organization at the highest level is sort of setting itself up to get the work done is what we're going to call a core structure. And so we talk about matrix organizations, functional organizations, front-back organizations. These are the basic high-level choices that an organization makes about how it divides up the work in order to get the work done. The second part of structure, though, is what we call the lateral organization. And this represents the way the organization coordinates horizontally. If you think about the core structure, we're organized around functions. We've got finance and operations and R&D and HR. The question becomes, how does that work in each of those functions get coordinated in such a way that new products are developed routinely, that new products move from R&D over into engineering, into manufacturing, and then out into the supply chain? How does marketing work with manufacturing and distribution so that they're selling and sending the right benefits to the customer? There's got to be some coordination that happens between functions or between business units between the headquarters organization and a subsidiary. There has to be this coordination. And so we'll spend a lot of time talking about the difference between core structures and lateral structures. And we'll spend a lot of time talking about lateral organizations, because that's really where a lot of organizations are struggling. As you think about technology and how technology has affected the way organizations are being put together, technology is really increasing the interdependence between different organizations, different functions, and different groups. And so you have to really think about and design those lateral structures with a lot of intention, because they just, as obvious as they might be, a lot of times they don't get designed intentionally. And so we'll spend a lot of time thinking about how to intentionally set up those coordinated processes so that the different parts of the organization are working well together. That'll be a big chunk of the day that we spend on Wednesday, is thinking about these different core structures and lateral mechanisms and how we put them together. Okay? As we keep moving around the star, we've got a set of management processes. And again, let's be sure that we're distinguishing between the work that managers do to coordinate the business and get the business running, and the work that is done by the salaried workers in the factories, in marketing, that's actually delivering value to the customer. So we want to make a distinction between these two different kinds of work. And when we talk about management processes, we'll talk about three of them really specifically. One is what you might call direction setting, strategic planning, goal setting. And it's getting the organization aligned and clear and shared about who's doing what. And these goal-setting processes are really important. They leak into resource allocation, budgeting kinds of processes that allow people and money and cash and capital to be coordinated so that we achieve the goals. So we'll talk a lot about direction setting and strategic planning as an important management process. We will also talk about decision-making and thinking about how to allocate certain roles and responsibilities and decision rights in the organization so that it's clear about who's doing what, who makes what decisions, who makes inputs to decision makers, and talk about the different roles involved in decision processes. And the third one we'll talk about is communication. Communication is, again, one of those words that people use to explain a lot of different things. What's a communication problem? Well, a lot of things can be a communication problem if you really aren't clear about what information needs to be communicated to whom, by when, and through what means. And so we spend a little bit of time on this one talking about getting really clear about what's the most important information that has to get moved around. How does it get moved around? How does that information get into a system of communication so that it does get moved to the right person at the right time so they can use it for coordination purposes. There's some other things that go inside of management processes. You've got learning processes. How does the organization sort of think about reflecting on what it does and doing it better? So continuous improvement processes would also fit inside of the management processes bubble. But we'll spend most of our time on those three, right? Getting clear about direction in the strategic planning process and budgeting, resource allocation process. Get really clear about decision-making and decision rights and who's making what decisions, and then talking a little bit about the communications process and trying to clarify that so that people aren't inundated by useless information, but they're really sort of getting the information they need to make good decisions. So that's the management processes bubble. The rewards bubble is really interesting because Jay Galbraith felt like it would be possible to sort of put, you know, the whole human resource function together into one bubble. You got people and recruiting and those kinds of things, which we'll talk about in a second. But you also have compensation and benefits, non-monetary rewards, you know, a variety of different things that you could use as a way to recognize and reward people for the kinds of behaviors that are necessary to make the strategy go, to execute the work processes, to work in the structure appropriately. He felt it was so important, that this rewards bubble was so important, that he actually pulled it out into its own star point. And so we'll spend a little bit of time on Wednesday afternoon sort of talking specifically about rewards and the nature of rewards that make them strategic and how they should be connected to the strategy and the work processes. So we'll spend a little bit of time talking about different kinds of rewards. There's obviously compensation and remuneration and things like that. But so there's also issues like the kind of work you do. The culture often gives you clues about the things that are rewarding in a particular culture. So status and different kinds of benefits are often culturally embedded, and we'll talk about those and how you can use those inside of organizations. So we'll talk about different kinds, not just money, but we'll talk about these non-monetary rewards and how they can be used to align the organization and get people to be thinking about the kind of work they should be doing to accomplish the work processes and capabilities, to work inside the existing core and lateral structures of the organization. So we'll spend a little bit of time talking about the design of effective reward systems and sort of challenge the idea that in a lot of organizations, when you go through org design, they want to say, well, you can change the structure and the work, and we want to fiddle with how we make decisions, but you can't talk about the reward system. And we want to sort of challenge that idea and at least get you to think flexibly about how, even if you get that kind of message, how you can still address reward systems in a redesign process. Okay. And then lastly, we'll finish this part of the webinar. We're going to talk about the people side. A lot of people that come into the program come from human resources, and so a lot of this material is more or less well known to the audience. But we want to sort of talk about and get clear about the role that people play inside of a design. So there's clearly some choices to be made about who is recruited, who's hired, who's retained inside the organization. There's obviously some important decisions to be made about how leaders are developed, how supervisory behaviors are encouraged, how skills and knowledge are brought into the organization so that as new technologies come along, as ecosystem strategies and platform strategies start to happen, what does that mean for how we treat our people in the organization, how we develop them, how we hire, retain those people. So we'll spend a good chunk of time there on Thursday afternoon talking about those competencies and the leadership issues and the general HR practices required to build a talent, human capital reservoir of folks that can execute on the strategy, do the work right, have the appropriate skills to operate inside the structure. And so we'll talk a little bit about that and pull it together in the first 2 days, right? So basically on Tuesday and Wednesday, we'll be kind of going around this model and providing you with examples and definitions and tools that help you think about how all this stuff kind of fits together. And I guess I would say the reason we told you all of that, the reason we kind of walked through each piece of the STAR model and tried to give you some indication about, what is this about? What is this STAR what is this STAR point about? What is management processes and structures and rewards? We want to give you a little taste of each one of those, and you'll be reading about them as you prepare for the course. But if you really said, why did you tell us that, Chris? This slide sort of gives you the answer. A lot of people come and they want to know about org design. You want to sort of figure out what's going on when organizations figure out how to structure and restructure themselves, when strategies have to change, when the organization adopts new technologies, when you implement an enterprise resource program, when you do a merger and acquisition. You're going to go through all these designs, and what people are looking for is this solutions concept. They want to know what the design is. And in order to answer that question, you got to sort of put that idea into a context. On the upper left-hand side here, you got the organization has a set of problems that it's trying to solve. It has a set of goals that it's trying to achieve. And that's all well and good, but you have to do so within a set of solutions criteria. A lot of problems are easy to solve if you have all the money in the world and all the right people, but you often don't. You're often working within some constraints, and so you need to be able to develop some solutions criteria. We'll actually talk about this in the strategy session on Tuesday afternoon. You need to develop some ways of working. These are the ways we want to solve these problems. These are the constraints we're living under. These are the kinds of issues that we think we're going to have to live with. These are the resources that we have. These are the values that we possess as an organization. These are all solutions criteria that provide some guidance with respect to how problems are solved and goals are achieved. And so there's this tension, right? Again, you can solve lots of problems. You can get lots of things accomplished if money's no object. But money is an object, and people, all people have strengths and weaknesses, and we have to work within that, work within those constraints, and to resolve those tensions, to come up with a really good solutions concept or organization design. Okay, that's the objective of the course. That's what we're trying to help build capability inside of your organizations as you come through the course. Well, in order to do that well, in order to have a really good, design, you need to be clear about what the first principles are. And the different points of the star that we just kind of went through, those are first principles. You've got to have a really sharp understanding of what a strategy is and some tools about how to clarify the strategy. You need to understand that there are options with respect to the core and lateral structures that you can use. There's different ways of allocating resources and setting goals and how frequently you do that. There's all kinds of rewards that you can use to motivate behavior. What we want to do in the course is we want to provide you with a lot of this background in these first principles so that you can take these different ideas and go back to your specific situation, different functions in your organization, different regions and geographies that you operate in, different products, different technologies, and then be able to use these first principles in a really flexible way so that you can come up with the right design for the right situation that you're facing inside your organization. And we just see these elements of the STAR model as crucial first principles to design. So we're going to spend a lot of time during the week, especially the first couple of days, really digging into these elements of design. And then on Thursday and Friday, try and take these first principles and begin to apply them in different ways. So what would we do if we were trying to build an organization that was really customer-centric? How would we think about designing functions and staff groups and centralized organizations? How would we think about the STAR model if we were using it to set up an agile, flexible organization? But it all comes back to being really clear about those first principles. And the STAR model for us represents that, you know, that kind of core set of ideas that we need to develop some muscles around as we think about going into and designing some organizations. Okay, that's the kind of the bigger picture of the content that we'll be covering over the course of the 3.5 days that you'll be in Southern California. Any questions kind of at this point? Because I've kind of delivered the meat of these first principles, and I'm going to try and move on now and give Beth a chance to sort of talk about how do you get the most out of the workshop. But before we do that, I do want to give anybody a chance who has a question about these first principles a chance to ask the question, and there'll be opportunity at the end as well. But just in case anybody's got a hot question that they have to ask right now, I want to make that available to you. Anything? You can type it in the box, or I see that our crack webmaster Alice has unmuted you all. So, any quick questions at this point? Hearing none, let's move into a different little sort of thing to talk about. And we've asked Beth, who's been part of the program. Beth at General Mills, she's been working to build design capability at General Mills, and is now part of the group here delivering the program. She's been through the program. She has I think some really good insights into how best to come to the program to get the most out of it. Beth, you want to take over and say a few things?
Great. As Chris mentioned, I went through the course, and I had to go through it twice, actually, to get as much out of it as I needed to, and I'll give you some background in that regard. It wasn't that I flunked the first time. I went to the course about a decade ago, 10 years ago, went out to USC, to the same program that you are experiencing. I went on my own. I was in our org development group at General Mills at the time, and felt that there was so much relevancy that I came back and brought a group of HR business partners to the following session. And so when we spend time together in a couple of weeks, if you personally are looking to build capability inside your organizations, I have a lot of experience, both good and bad, of what I can share with you. But what I want to spend our time, a few minutes yet today, is how can you get the most out of your time in the next 2 weeks? And I will tell you there is a lot of material. Chris has just shared with you the fundamental framework of the STAR model, but we'll be sharing a number of other frameworks, tools, and most importantly, examples of how it's been applied at other organizations and other case studies. But it does take time to digest, both during the session as well as the pre-work that you've got. So I would say some of the best practices that we know to prepare you for this intense 3.5 days is to dive into that org design pre-work tool that you received and reflect it on that tool against a challenge that you're faced with within your own organization. And then read and reflect on the case studies that have gone out. Those are a great way to immerse yourself in how other organizations, other examples, possibly outside your own industry, which I think is a great way to learn, is how has it been done elsewhere. And then be prepared that during the 3.5 days, we will be giving you small amounts of homework in the evening. So not a laborious amount, but a case study or two for you to read in your hotel room that night. So I know many of us during these times when we're booked all day, we tend to want meetings or emails at night. So I just want you to be prepared that there'll be a little bit of reading in the evenings. I also want to call out that the principles that you're going to learn are really the core knowledge base. And if I were to categorize these 3.5 days, I would say they are like a master's level course. you will get quite a lot of information, and in some cases you will be overwhelmed by the amount of information. So that's why I think it's important that you come in crystal clear on what is a situation that you're dealing with so that you can take some of the knowledge back and apply it. You won't be able to apply everything, but what I would highly recommend, and this is what I did after the first time I attended, and then frankly the second time I went through it, is plan in advance who you want to share these learnings with when you go back. And what I would highly recommend is that you even put some time on calendar. So if you've got a line client, a stakeholder, your boss, someone who this information would be relevant for you to share, I would set up time. And in my particular case, I had a line client that was struggling with some org design challenges that when I attended the course, a light bulb went on for me, and I felt I needed to take some of this content back to them immediately upon returning. So while I was at the course, I set up time on their calendar. What might make sense for you is you may want to spend some time when you get home soaking on the content. So maybe set up an hour meeting with that line client a month from now, but get it on the calendar either now or when you're at the session. We know one of the best ways for this, for content, for you to actually learn content is to teach it. So what I found is that once I got back, the faster I could get up in front of either my peers or in this case a line client and share this information, the more it soaked in, the more I became adept at sharing that information. And I think I hear someone typing, so if we either mute, or is that you, Chris?
No, it's not me, but I was just going to say, so you guys are unmuted, so if you're working in the background, you'll probably, we'll all be able to hear you, just so you know.
Yeah. At least I didn't hear a baby cry or a dog barking, which is
that's right, exactly
pretty common on the conference calls I've been on. So if I could just sum it up, I would say that it's going to be an intense week. You're going to get a lot of information, and I would say piecing out what you think will be most relevant for you to take back and apply it immediately would be some best practices. And then during the session, I'll be talking about some designing of functions, but I can also share with you during lunches or at the end of the day, how do you build internal capability within your organization? Because there may be some of you on the call who part of your charter of going to this course is to figure out how to build this skill within your HR organization and or your line clients. And I've got quite a bit of experience there, again, the good, the bad, and the ugly that I can share with you when we spend more time together in a couple weeks out in LA.
Fantastic. Just the other thing I would just sort of piggyback on is, you know, that design pre-work tool that Beth mentioned, having a chance to fill that out and reflect on, you know, the challenge or challenges that you've got inside your organization today. We will be giving you specific time across the course of the 3.5 days to sort of go back to that and say, okay, here's some ideas, here's some examples, here's some cases that we've worked on. What ideas does this give you about how you can move forward with respect to a strategy or a structure or a management process? So that design tool, pre-work tool, I think really prepares you nicely for being able to hear these different alternative ways of thinking about design and then bringing that back. So we'll be you know, quite deliberate about, you know, carving out, you know, 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there, 5 minutes here, to give you a chance to go back and sort of say, oh, geez, now I see why that one isn't working right. We can make a couple of changes here to make it better. So for sure that pre-work tool is cool.
And it looks like Julie's got a question. Alice, maybe you can respond to that didn't receive the design pre-work tool.
That was mailed to you with the book. Did you get it yet? Maybe today. Because I think we sent yours out on Wednesday.
Okay.
So it's on its way.
Did you hear that?
It's on its way, Julie.
Yeah, so if you didn't get it yesterday, you'll probably get it today then. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Sure. And with that, we've got a good chunk of time here at the end. We can, you know, answer questions, start a discussion. What kinds of things that did Beth and I talk about that sort of got your brain started, and what kinds of questions might you have for us to help you get the most out of the time in Southern California? Feel free to speak up or type in the box. We'll be happy to give some ideas. I can't imagine that Beth and I were that clear.
Yes, yeah.
That you don't have any, you know, there's too many things we talked about.
Hey, this is Michael.
Hi, Michael.
Hey, Michael. Fire away.
I just feel like talking for the sake that it's Friday, and you did a great job presenting, and thank you for your time. And maybe just more, you know, I have not looked at the agenda for a while, but, you know, maybe walking through a little bit more what a day in the life is going to be like for us when we're there.
Sure. Oh, that's great. I think the way I'd sort of describe that is I'd say, you know, kind of Tuesday and Wednesday, we sort of look at each of those pieces of the star. Sue will kind of kick us off on Tuesday morning and give you a little bit of background. I won't call it a history lesson. It's sort of a, you know, we need to understand and be really clear and sharp about the story we tell to the people inside of our organizations about why design is important. And so I think Sue does a really good job of sort of setting up that conversation and really, you know, making the case about why design is critical. Then Tuesday afternoon, I'll talk about strategy, again, to try and set that framework and that context for how everything else sort of goes. As Beth mentioned, usually every night we'll hand out a little article for you to read, and it's something that to kind of keep you thinking about some different things and get you ready for a conversation the next day. On Tuesday morning, Sue will start off again talking about sort of work design and structures and lateral organizations, move around to management processes. Beth and Sue will start talking about management processes, and by the afternoon we'll get into people and rewards. And so that those first 2 days are just kind of laying the foundation, if you will, around these first principles and providing you with cases, opportunities to discuss stuff. How does it look inside your own organization? You guys will be sitting in tables of about 4 people, 5 people, and we try our best. You know, we're professors, so sometimes we like to talk a lot, but we try our best to really give you a good chunks of time to talk about a case, to talk about a situation in your organization, to use a tool that we talked about. So those first couple of days are really kind of in that grounded way. Then with that background, I think Thursday is, again, application. So Sue will talk about customer-centric organization. Then Beth's going to talk about functional reorganizations and functional design. Then I'm going to talk about organization agility. And again, we'll be trying to give you examples and cases and principles and talk about here's what it looks like when it's all sort of put together. And we keep using the STAR model as the background to those pieces. On Friday morning, Becky comes in, and Becky has this great sort of story that she tells about how, like Beth, she went through the program, and here's how she tried to make sense of all this stuff that we just kind of dumped into your brain, and how she went back and kind of re-entered into her organization, and how she's been developing first at Sun Microsystems and now at Oracle, she's been trying to think about design in her organization. And we closed the morning out on Friday talking a little bit about implementation issues. I think it's fair to say, Beth, implementation kind of runs a little bit throughout the week, but we really try and provide a couple of sort of different perspectives on it on Friday morning after Becky chats. So it's, the three of us, Sue and Beth and I, we're talking at you and trying to explain things and providing examples, and then we try and give you opportunities to talk in small group settings. Kind of chew on a case, chew on an example, apply a tool, give you a chance to reflect on your pre-work and what you might do when you go back. So there's kind of this rhythm of inputs, discussion, report outs, feedback, and that cycle kind of rolls around over those 3.5 days.
That's super helpful. And also, as far as like, how do you arrange sits where we sit with our team, or do you kind of disperse us throughout so that way we're dispersing others out there?
Cool. No, good question. What we do on the first day, on Tuesday, Alice tries to do a pretty good job of, if you're coming with a team, Alice tries to split everybody up a little bit. And so, especially on that first day, we try and take advantage of the fact that there are people from different companies and different industries, and to give you a chance of seeing some of these org design issues from different points of view. I think that's one of the advantages. I'll actually speak to that a little bit at the beginning of the session. On Tuesday, on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we kind of give you a chance to do what you want to do. If you've got a team of people that's coming and you want to spend that time on on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday in your groups so that you can apply stuff sort of specifically, you've got the opportunity to do that. You can make your choices about who to sit with and what's the best way for you to get the most out of the program.
Thank you so much, you two. That was really helpful.
Look forward to meeting you.
Boy, we try. I think one of the things you'll notice about us is that we try really hard.
Yes. This is Alice. Can I just say something real quick, Chris?
Sure, please.
For those of you on the phone that have not sent in your bio page, it's still not too late. So please send them.
Yeah, there is sort of a community. And I don't know, I wouldn't call it hazing so much as, there's a bunch of people who've been through this program now, and because it is pretty intense. I think Beth used the right word there. It's an intense week, and I think you end the week with 30 new friends who you sort of understand are going through some of the same challenges in different ways. But I do think there's an opportunity to build some community, and we try and do some things for the org design community at SC in the center to give everybody a chance. So we were trying to figure out some clever way to help people meet and learn about different people. Different people in the class.
Any other questions
come to mind? Yeah. Well, if there aren't any, I'm going to give you 7 minutes back to your day.
Woohoo.
If questions come up, I think the first point of contact right now, at least, is Alice. And if you've got a specific question about some content issues or the way the program's run, a lot of times Alice can answer them. But if not, she'll funnel your question to Sue or Beth or I, and we'll get back with you in advance of the program. But absent that, really looking forward to meeting you all face to face and having a good week, talking about a subject that at least I know the three of us are pretty darn interested in. We get pretty excited talking about this stuff. I suppose you could call that a weakness. You know,
yeah.
we're kind of, you know, we're a little addicted to this material. So. All right.
Hey.
Absent any other questions, I'll give you back to your day. We'll be done 5 minutes early, and we'll declare victory.
And we'll see you all in a little over a week.
See you in a couple of weeks. Yeah, sounds good.
Bye,
Thanks to everybody for calling in.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice job, Beth.
Yeah, I think we had. How many did we have online?
It looks like about 20 this time. But
yeah, I was going to say